Well, we've got a lot to talk about tonight, so it's a good time to get started. First of all, thanks for being here, those of you that are here in the core and those of you that are here electronically. We appreciate your participation in this. And certainly feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try and check the chat as we finish up so that I can answer any other questions that come in from outside during the presentation. But those of you that are here, certainly feel free to throw out topics that you're interested in and things that I can help with. Obviously, I'm here to help you, so whatever I can share that would be helpful to you in your process at this point, that's what we want to start with. But speaking of starting, let's begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for just the opportunity to be here tonight. We thank you for these young people and the blessings that they are to all of us. God, empower us now by your Spirit to be good stewards of these young people and the lives that you blessed them with. Help us to guide them and nurture and encourage them down the path that you've laid out for them. Help us to see with your eyes and to speak with your voice as we share with them whatever wisdom and guidance that we can provide. And Lord, work in their hearts and minds to hear you and to hear your voice and to respond to that Spirit that they can become all that you've created them to be. Thank you, God, for this night, and bless us in your name. Amen. Okay, so junior college night. I know some people are already saying, wow, can't believe it's this time already. And I run into the same sort of things when I start talking to juniors about the fact that when they return to school this fall, they need to be done with their college search process. That usually results in some deer in the headlights kind of a look. And then we kind of back down and say, okay, this is the time frame you got left. It's not like you're too far behind the game, but these are the things that need to happen from here on out. And that's really a big part of what we're here to talk about tonight. What is it that needs to happen from here on out? What can we expect? And what kind of decisions need to be made? Where should we go to get some input and help with that? And what is it that we need to have ready and when? And what is that process going to look like? So here's just a run through of some of the topics that we're going to be looking at tonight. Again, raise your hands if there's some others that you're interested in and other things that we can help with, but this is where we're going to begin. Obviously, we're here because there's a lot of cost benefits to an education. Yes, it's very expensive, but we need to look at it in terms of an investment that'll have returns in ways we can't measure. In a lot of ways that can be measured, as you see here, but in ways that can't be measured. Ultimately, as we understand ourselves as a school and a Christ-centered school and understanding these children truly as gifts of God, we're really here just to help them become whoever it is that God wants them to be. And that's not necessarily, in every case, going to look the same for everyone. And for some, it's going to involve this kind of college experience. And so for these, it's going to be this kind of college experience. And for some, it might not even be a typical college experience. It could be all sorts of different things. We're going to talk about that as well. But obviously, there's some things that we want to try to do at this point to make sure that all the opportunities are available to them so that they can be everything God created them to be. One of the things I'd like to talk about, and just to set some perspective here for people, is what do we see as we take a look at the jobs in our economy? This is an interesting study. There's a presentation put out by Minnesota State that deals with just what do the jobs look like in our economy. And basically what this says is that of all the positions that require some type of post-high school education, what level of education do jobs require? And so what this basically says is out of 10 jobs that require some kind of post-high school education, one of them is going to require some sort of advanced degree, a master's degree or more. 2 will require a bachelor's degree. And 7 will involve some other type of certificate or 2-year degree. Now, what does that mean? Well, the perception that we have in our world today is that, well, everybody needs to get at least a bachelor's degree in order to be successful. Well, there's nothing wrong with getting a bachelor's degree. It's a big part of what we're here to talk about tonight. And there's nothing wrong with looking beyond that as well. However, I also want to make sure everyone knows that's not the be-all, end-all for everyone. And there are a lot of great other opportunities that are available for people. As I talk with kids about this, I talk about, think about this in the context of, let's say you broke your leg and your mom takes you to the emergency room. Who do you see? Well, you're probably going to see one doctor. you'll probably see one or two other nurses that have probably got at least a bachelor's degree. And you'll probably see a whole slew of other people that fall into this category, everything from, you know, an x-ray assistant to a surgical room assistant to the person that takes your blood to the person that, you know, XYZ, right on down the list. And all those are going to be people that have some very good, well-skilled positions that are making some good money in the medical field in particular. And, you know, that's a great opportunity for them. So I just want to help set the context for people of recognizing that there's a lot of great opportunities out there, and it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of a scenario. One of the things that's a little unfortunate for a lot of folks is there are a number of kids that they get into a four-year college degree into an area for which there really is a lack of opportunity for employment. The best example I typically talk about is the fact that kids love to go to college and get a bachelor's degree in psychology. It's fun to study psychology, I get that. There's a lot of things you can learn, a lot of benefits you get from that. However, one of the realities is there are virtually no jobs in which you can get with a bachelor's degree in psychology. If you're going to be any kind of psychologist, any kind of certified professional in that sort of an area, you've got to have more than a bachelor's degree. So again, think about those sorts of issues as you're thinking about what your future is going to look like for you. The other thing I talk with kids about is this is the economy ratio, okay? Not necessarily reflected in our school, certainly, and every school is a little bit different. As I take a look at our stats for our kids over the course of the last number of years, you know, this is usually more in the 2 or 3 out of every 10 of our graduates. This is easily in the 4 or 5 out of every graduate, and this is more in the 2 or 3 for our graduates here, okay? Just to help set a context of what is typical for us. The point is, there's no one size fits all. What fits you, what works well for you is what's best. We talk, if you've been to these programs before, years before, I've told you since you were in junior high and a freshman, colleges are looking for graduates. They're looking for potential college graduates, not high school graduates. They know that they're going to get that. What they're really looking for are who are the people that are going to be the most likely to work through our 4-year program and first of all, complete the 4-year program without dropping out, and secondly, graduate with a good likelihood of getting a position or going into graduate school. Those are the numbers that are that typically most well define a quality college. And as they all get ranked by US News and all sorts of other agencies every year, they want to make sure that the people they're bringing in are very likely to stay and to graduate. So what does that mean for you in terms of how that looks as you're putting together your resume? Hopefully at this point we've already gotten into the fact that, well, I certainly want to make sure I've got the grades for this, and the GPA should indicate that. I certainly want to make sure I was taking the best classes that I possibly could. And a component of that also is the fact that those solid classes and a good GPA is also going to put me in a good position for a good standardized test score. Because again, those of you that are looking at getting into that here in the near future, ACT will tell you that only 2 things you can do that really make a difference in getting a good grade in your ACT is take hard classes and do your homework. That's exactly what college is looking for, kids that are willing to take hard classes and do their homework. Those are kids who are going to succeed in high school, they're going to succeed on the ACT, and they're going to succeed in college. So that's a big makeup of what we're looking for when we're talking about graduates. All those other activities that you're involved with are indicators as well, because colleges, again, realize that kids that are engaged in the high school experience are going to get engaged in the college experience in most cases. And if they're engaged in that college experience, they're a part of that community, they're a part of that campus, they're a part of that culture, very likely that they're going to stay because they're connected. And so that becomes an important factor, and hopefully you've been involved in activities that'll indicate that that's a part of what you're about as you look at college in the future as well. Let me mention here, as we're talking about standardized test scores, we hear so many things in the news about colleges that are going test optional. Test optional, again, means schools can look at the score if you're going to send it in, but they're not going to require you to send it in. Test blind means they're not going to look at the score whether you send it in or not. Typically, those 2 descriptors fall in the category of college acceptance. Don't necessarily always apply to college scholarship. A lot of universities are getting a lot of great PR for going test blind or test optional for acceptance, but they're still looking for test scores when it comes time to determine who gets the scholarships. So keep that in mind as you're talking to specific schools and find out what their policies are on those sorts of issues, because there's great potential here for you guys getting some significant merit scholarships, okay? We talked a little bit before about test scores, so I won't go any further into that. I will mention that as we get into the senior year, just to kind of set a context for our sequence here. So we've had the testing session here for juniors. This is the college search session for juniors. In the fall, we'll have a financial aid session for seniors, and that'll focus on the scholarship side of things, FAFSA, and all those different types of aids that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, as well as then a final session on just the college final decision-making and what do we do now, next steps, and all those sorts of things. So there's two more sessions of this for next year that tie into that. And again, what we do outside the classroom and what else you have on your resume is significant. The ACT results, again, are going to be important for you, not only in terms of acceptance, but also the scholarship routine. So there's some information back there about some test prep that you can be involved in. Certainly encourage you, again, to take the tests multiple times. You can select different tests depending upon what fits best for you. That was a topic that we talked about in our last session. If you weren't part of that, you can download that from Counselor's Corner. All these events are recorded there, so that's available for you if you missed that. One of the things that becomes an issue right now for juniors is, okay, I'm not really sure what I am looking for. I'm not really sure what I want to be. I'm not sure where I want to go next. So how do I get started? We do have some tools available for you on that. First of all, in Counselor's Corner, one of the tools is this Illinois Career Information System. It includes an interest inventory, career inventory, some planning resources, and some college search capabilities. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for all sorts of help relative to the college search process. There are some other tools on there that are just about how do I figure out what I want to major in. And so there's lots of questionnaires you go through, questions you answer, and they'll come back with like, okay, this looks like 5 areas that you might be interested in. The ILCIS system will, again, have a similar sort of a interest inventory for you. They have some skill inventories and that as well. They also talk about career clusters. So if you can use some of those surveys to kind of figure out what career cluster you're in, then you can take a look at all the different occupations that fall into that cluster. That can be helpful for you then to determine, okay, so am I really looking for, you know, a data-centered, information-centered position, or am I looking for a people-focused position, or am I looking for, you know, a doer, mechanical builder kind of a position, et cetera. So if you can start narrowing some things down, take a look at what's within those clusters, you can get some ideas about different potential occupations. That system also has a very extensive library of information on occupations. And it'll even give you income information that's specific to Illinois for that occupation, as well as what the outlook is for that occupation 5, 10 years from now in terms of how many openings are available from year-to-year basis, whether or not that field is growing or declining. So a lot of help for you there. And these are things that I've worked with your students on in the past. So hopefully they're familiar with what I'm talking about. And if not, the information about how to get logged into it and so on is on Counselor's Corner. And that'll be available to you on this PowerPoint too, which will be also saved on the system. Then there's also a system on there that you can go in and literally answer about 8, 10 questions and do a college search right from that site. How big a school do I want to go to? Geographically, where do I want it to be? What major am I looking for? What level of activities do I want to have? What level of costs am I looking at? You know, am I looking at 2-year, 4-year, et cetera? You answer, you know, 6 or 8 of those kind of questions, and you get to the end, and it'll literally spill out a list of colleges that meet those criteria that you've requested. From there, you can easily link to those schools based on the hot links there on the page, et cetera. So that can be one of the tools that you use. So, okay, I don't know where to start. What are some schools that are good for that? Another thing that's real practical, and you know, realize that as we're dealing with most any information that's online, This system's pretty good because this is a program that's actually put together by a university out on the West Coast that the state of Illinois basically provides for Illinois schools. And so that's how we have it. So it's solid information. However, they're going to tell you that XYZ school has a major in this field. And it's not necessarily going to say anything to you about, okay, so how strong a major do they have? And what does that look like in terms of preparation for the next level and that sort of thing? Those are some things you're going to need to spend a little bit more time digging into. Obviously, there's some questions that you can ask, and we have some materials on there to give some suggestions about what questions you should ask when you talk to colleges and when you visit colleges and so on. There's some questions that you can ask that can help you find the right information as you're comparing school to school to school. But something else to keep in mind too is that, you can literally go on and Google, what are the top ranked colleges in the Midwest in pre-med programs, okay? And you're gonna need to look through it and kind of figure out where that site's coming from to determine the validity of it. But there are some very good nonprofit, simply informational college sites out there for you that can provide some great information in those kinds of searches. There are a lot of other resources on Counselor's Corner. There's a whole page of resources about just the college planning and college search process. So there's a lot of great tools there for you to use that obviously we're familiar with and are kind of vouching for in terms of the fact that we put them on our website. So feel free to dig into those sites. It's really just something that's going to take you some time to kind of pour into that and dig into what some other schools look like and to really be spending some time thinking about what it is that fits you well. That's a big part of this whole process. We're going to talk about that a little bit as we go on tonight, but there's that essence of a college search that's very scientific and very factual. And so, yeah, I want a school that's this size. I want it geographically located here. I want this particular major. You can go through all those sorts of steps, and you're still going to find that, okay, yeah, this sounds like it's really going to be something that fits me. And you're going to go to that school for a visit, and you're going to walk onto that campus, and for some reason, you're just going to say, nope, this is just not it. And sometimes you're not going to be able to describe why. You're just going to know it's not the right fit. And there's going to be other places that you go, and you're going to be thinking that maybe, okay, I'll just try this place, but I'm not so sure it's going to be what I'm looking for, but let's just stop by, we're on our way to grandma's house, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden you walk onto that campus and you're going to say, yeah, this feels right. There's no formula that describes that. There's no magic potion that gives you that inclination before you actually make that visit. It's just something that virtually every kid talks to me about after they've come back from visiting schools. Again, there's part of it that just needs to feel right. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as we get on further in the program tonight, because there's some of this that can be very scientific and very descriptive and very clearly laid out, and there's some of it that's just, yeah, that just doesn't feel right. Okay. Some things we talk about just from a very beginning stage is, okay, so what kind of school should we be looking at? 2-year or 4-year school. Just to get some ideas as we consider those different options. Right now, a lot of people are looking at going to local community colleges because of the whole COVID situation, and this is going to be a lot less expensive, and it's going to work better for me in terms of I can stay home and that sort of thing. And if we have to learn remote anyway, then why would I go spend all that money to stay in a dorm room and so on? And that's a complicated issue right now. But there are other elements of this decision about the 2-year and 4-year school that we need to be familiar with. Obviously, there's some significant benefits of a 2-year school, but there are some other elements of it that are worth consideration. Now, again, what matters to each kid is going to be totally different. And so that becomes, again, part of that personal process. For some students, the idea of not having a real campus life and not having being a part of a community of engaged students is no big deal, because that's not important to them. Okay, well, then a community college could be a great fit. For others, that's a big part of the experience that they want to have in terms of being a part of a college campus. And so in that case, then a 2-year school is not going to be a good fit. A concern that I always share with students as we're talking about a two-year community college is thinking about where it is you want to end up. The reality is, as you take a look, and there's a lot of different figures here, but you know, the issue is how many people going to a two-year school eventually end up with that four-year degree that they sought after from the beginning. Well, the national statistics are typically under 10%. Now, some of that's because the kids that go to a two-year school are not looking for a four-year degree, so obviously that means they wouldn't get one. But the other portion of that is that there are a lot of kids that intend to go on to get a four-year degree, start at a two-year school, and never get beyond that. And again, there can be some good reasons for that. However, in many cases too, those students, they're still living at home, they're going to their community college, they've got a job at the same time, they get done with community college, and yeah, this job's working out okay, so maybe I'll just stick with that for a while and see what happens. You know, 20 years later, they look back on that and think otherwise. So my encouragement to kids is they're looking for a four-year program, you really need to be determined about making a commitment that when I get done at that community college, I'm going to go on. Because it's just unfortunate to see the percentage of kids that intend that when they start, but never quite complete. So that's the biggest concern that I share with kids, and so an important thing for you to talk about. There's a lot of things for us to talk about relative to college visits. There's a lot of colleges who have not been offering visits for the last 6, 8, 10 months are starting to reopen to that now. So definitely encourage you to check that out. Schools that are not or have not been offering visits have done a pretty good job in most cases of putting out some good materials for you to see and to take advantage of in terms of virtual tours, virtual interviews, virtual student panels, virtual parent panels, all those sorts of things. So I would definitely, you know, encourage you to look at those sorts of things if you've got a school of interest that doesn't have a visit. But if it's at all possible, a visit is great. Now, realize the other thing I'll kind of throw out there too, some schools might not be offering official visits, but particularly if you're looking at a fairly sizable university, typically they're not guarding all the doors to the campus. So there's ways for you to just go and make a visit that's not necessarily an official visit. You can, obviously, you won't get into dorms that way, and you probably won't get into a lot of the buildings, but you can still make a visit of sorts and just see at least what the university situation looks like. So just something to keep in mind as you think about that. I always encourage kids to do what would be considered unofficial tour. If you go there, you get the official guest tour and that sort of thing. It's pretty much a canned program, and you can probably carry it from one school to the next and hear pretty much the same sort of thing. Whether or not you get a good experience on that tour has a lot more to do with the questions that you ask, because they've got a kind of prescribed script of what they're going to tell you. You should have a script of what it is you want to find out, particularly as you're going to be going from one school to another to compare. And one of the things I always tell kids is, don't make your favorite school your first visit, because your second and third visits are going to be better visits because you learned a lot from the first one that you made and the second one that you made, and now you are doing a better job of knowing what to look for and what questions to ask. So if you've got a favorite school, don't make that your first visit. Be sure to talk to students, be sure to talk to whoever actually does the teaching, which is going to be different depending upon the type of school that you're going to. Take a look at the facilities where you're going to spend most of your time. If you're going into an engineering program, it's great to see the library, but you're probably not going to spend a lot of time there. It's going to be important for you to obviously see the engineering facilities or the medical facilities if you're in a pre-med program, that sort of thing. Make sure you talk to financial aid people. How much aid do they have that's need-based, and how much do they have that's need-blind? In other words, it's going to be simply based on other factors like your school credentials and those sorts of things. Take a look at this whole issue here of things like research programs. If you're looking at something that's going to involve going into a graduate school, it's going to be very important for you to really dig into what are the research opportunities that are going to be available for me here. What are the other extended learning programs, internships that are going to be available to me here? That's a critical question for you to ask if you're not going into a program that's graduate school related. The whole idea of internships is critical because for many people that becomes their foot in the door for their first job. And so you're going to want to talk to those schools. Okay, what kind of program do you have here for internships for your students and that sort of thing? Those are critical things to ask about. You're also going to want to talk about placement and acceptance rates when it comes to grad school. And that's where you really get into some important comparisons. And you're going to want to kind of be sure that as you compare numbers that you're comparing apples to apples as you hear from different schools, because sometimes, you know, an acceptance rate or a placement rate can be, you know, well, you know, out of the number of people that were in our nursing program that had this kind of a GPA, we had this kind of placement rate. Okay, well, what was your placement rate for the people that didn't have that GPA? Okay, so those are some things you need to, you know, make sure you're getting some good information when you're asking about those elements, because the whole idea of placement and acceptance rates, if you're going into a pre-med program or something like that, that's going to be key. And realize that there are a lot of programs in the medical field as a whole that in the past have not required graduate school that now do. And so those are questions that you're going to need to make sure that you ask about as well. You know, 20 years ago, physical therapists didn't have to have anything but a bachelor's degree. 10 years ago, they had to have a master's degree. Now they got to have a doctorate. Okay, so all that leads to some different questions that I need to ask as I'm talking to schools about their programs in those fields. The other thing you're going to want to talk about relative to that is the whole issue of the type of entry that we have into the program. Realize that when you're talking to colleges, there's typically going to be two things that you need to apply for. First, you need to apply for entrance to the college. Second, you're going to need to apply for entrance to the program that you're interested in. Okay, so I went to Concordia University in Nebraska, and so when I was a senior in high school, I applied to the university. When I was a sophomore at the university, I then applied for the secondary education program. Now, that could have been a little problematic if it would have turned out after I went to the school, which was primarily a teacher's college, and I was going for a teaching degree, if after my sophomore year I would have found out I was not accepted into the education program. That would have been a bad thing. So some schools now offer a direct admit program. In other words, they'll say, okay, you're coming here to go in our physical therapy program. Great. Let's look at your numbers, and if your application is strong, they're going to say, okay, we're not only going to accept you into our school, we're going to directly admit you into the program. And in some cases, those schools will directly admit you into the graduate level of their program as well, because some of them will have a 5 years and you get a bachelor's and a master's package. In other words, they kind of squish some of those master's classes into the end of your 4-year program, and in a 5-year span, they'll give you what would have otherwise typically been a 6-year program. So that can be a huge advantage for you, but they'll also commit to allowing you to enter that graduate program at the beginning of your freshman year if you've got the numbers that support that. So those are definitely some questions you want to ask about situations where your potential career could involve graduate school. Okay, questions on any of that? Okay. I always like to throw in the thing here about distance. Some people get nervous about how far away a school is and that sort of thing. It's interesting to hear from kids. Some of them want to be close to home, and some of them definitely don't want to be close to home and that sort of thing. You know, I love my parents, but when I went to school, I went to a school that was 800 miles away. And back in the days of 55-mile-an-hour speed limits, that was an 18-hour trip. So they dropped me off in August, and I went home for Christmas. And that was good for me. I think it was good for them too, actually. But you know, don't get hung up on that, because that can be a big part of the whole growing process, the whole maturation process, and there's a lot that can happen during that kind of time frame and distance and so on. So just throwing that out there. So when you visit, what do we look for? Obviously, there's some things like affordability that are going to be key. You're going to want to look at, what's the chances of being accepted and so on, and that's going to be primarily based on things like GPA and test scores. That's why it's important that you do get in some test scores soon. I always talk to juniors about getting signed up for the April, May, June, July tests. So you can get those results back, and that can be a part of your discussion with those schools when you visit. You're obviously going to want to take a look at the majors that they offer. And again, we talked about the graduate opportunities and direct entry and those sorts of things. For some, it's just the college size and location, and that becomes significant factors. There's also this whole thing about culture of the campus. Every school kind of has its own culture, and that plays off of sometimes where it's set in terms of, urban, suburban, rural, that sort of thing. Sometimes it plays off of what percentage of the population is residential. And, I've heard horror stories from kids that have come back and said, man, I thought this was going to be a great community for me to join, but I didn't realize that 80% of the kids go home every weekend. What do I do now? Well, those are some of the things you definitely want to find out about, because that can be a rude awakening if you find out that, the weekend life, the social life of the campus isn't what you expected it to be. So all those sorts of things play into the issue of, what is the culture of that campus like? So look into those sorts of things. And again, that comes from, in many cases, talking to just students and not necessarily just the ones that give you the tours. A lot of times as colleges will give you a pass to the dining hall, that sort of thing. That's where you're going to find out about the school. Just sit down there, and the rest of the students are going to know you're visitors. I mean, it could be 30,000 people on the campus, and you're still going to look like visitors. They're still going to know that you're not a student there. And in many cases, they're going to be anxious to talk to you, because if they really are proud of their school, they're going to want to talk to you about it. But they don't work for the admissions department, so it's much more likely they're going to tell you the truth. Shouldn't put it that way, but they'll tell you the whole story. And some of it involves asking them the right questions. Don't be afraid to ask them, what don't you like about this school? And if they tell you, oh, nothing, it's absolutely wonderful, find somebody else to talk to. But ask those kinds of questions. There's nothing wrong with that. Summer enhancement programs. We talked about the issue of internships and those sorts of things. A lot of other types of enhancement programs, a lot of schools are big on offering. Some of those are out of country, out of state. A biology program involves a 2-3 week summer class down in the Caribbean doing research on dolphins or something like that. Those sorts of things can really be significant experiences for you. Again, helpful in terms of potential career and that sort of thing, but just great additional programs for you to take advantage of. College Essay Guy is a website, is a guy that does some really cool things for students in the college entry process and that sort of thing. So he's got some great stuff for how to choose a college. So I just threw that on there. So there's this Gallup study that was done that talks about, what does a great life look like? I think this is something that's really helpful to apply to your college search process. What does a great college life look like? Okay, so how do you occupy your time, liking what you do each day? So to look for that as you're out doing that visit. What am I going to occupy my time with here during the day? Now, hopefully a fair amount of that is study, but where's that going to be? What's it going to look like? How do I like the opportunities and facilities that exist for that? How do I like the facilities of the buildings that I'll be spending a lot of time in, and so on? Social relationships, okay? So, some of us really love the social relationships that we can develop in a university that's got 40,000 people on campus. Some of us are going to feel a whole lot better if we're on a campus that's got like 2,000 people. Okay, which one fits you? That's going to be an important part of the social connection that you're going to be able to make. How does the financial situation of the school look? What's the economics of it look like? Hopefully, back there on the table, you found I brought some documents that give some price information for schools. Some of it's from this year, last year, that sort of thing, but it gives you some ballpark pictures on some public schools, some private schools, local schools, out-of-state schools, that kind of thing. So be sure to take a look at those sorts of things. One of the things I always want to mention to people is, don't think that the whole idea of private school is out of the question because of expense and so on. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but there's more of that story that you need to dig into before you make some final decisions. What's the community look like? What opportunity is there for me to be engaged and involved? Okay, so Concordia, Nebraska was a campus of a little over 1,000 students in a city of a little over 5,000 students in rural Nebraska. And people are thinking, what in the world would you do on a weekend in Seward, Nebraska? I don't know, we found a lot of cool stuff to do. First of all, the campus was just built around providing things for those people to do because virtually nobody left on the weekends. Everybody was there. And we just did all kinds of really fun stuff. Well, that was just a part of that community, but they provided as a school a lot of structured opportunities for kids to get engaged in things. And so it was wonderful. Look for, what is it that's going to look like for you that you're going to enjoy and appreciate and like. But, some schools that are in urban centers where most of the people drive in, they're not going to have a lot of that. So, and physical well-being. What sort of opportunities are there for you to work out and exercise and be healthy and all those sorts of things? But the idea is think about, what does a great life look like? Well, what does a great college life look like? So think about those same categories in the context of your college experience. This is another index of research that was done again by Gallup and through Purdue University, talking about some important indicators of providing an emotionally supportive environment at the college. So at least one professor made me excited about learning. Professors cared about me as a person. There was a mentor who encouraged my goals and dreams. And then here's the percentage of graduates who experienced all three, okay? So, those are some things to be thinking about and to be asking about as you take a look at schools and make comparisons. Similarly, what about experiential learning elements? What about project learning and something beyond just sitting and listening to a professor drone on? A long-term project, taking a semester or more. Not very many people did that. Or an internship. Extremely involved in extracurricular activities and organizations. And again, percentage of all graduates who experienced all three. Okay, well, those are some important things that are part of that whole life experience. So look into those types of things as you're talking to schools and so on. And there's this sense that there's more to a college experience. There's more to a college education than just what you come away with from the book knowledge. Okay? There's more that you learn by being a part of that community than just the content of the classes. And you're going to want to take a look at that college community then and ask yourself, okay, what am I going to learn from this community? And what am I going to look like after I've spent 4 years here? Keeping in mind that, I'm going to be here 8-9 months a year for pretty much all the time. What am I going to look like when I'm done having had that experience? This is some information about a study that was done actually by some universities, comparing them with flagship public universities. The research is available to you here, and I encourage you to take a look at it as you're thinking about this issue of public versus private. In this case, the private schools were Lutheran, but the results are not specifically Lutheran. The results are really comparing what's the difference between going to a public university and going to a private university. I encourage you to take a look at that if those are some questions that you're asking. Because I think there's some validity to making that comparison before you get too far down that road. And one of the things I think that makes sense to think about is, what were some of the intangible benefits you consider when you say you're a student at Rockford Lutheran? What sort of other intangible benefits are you looking at as you send your kid off to college? So, look at that research. I think it's really helpful. It gets into some specifics here about alumni and faculty, or student and faculty relationships. Gets into connections and connections. It involves things like, what kind of a mentor relationship was I able to establish? I had 4 kids. I went to college. One of them went to Valpo. We visited there. We visited a lot of different schools, engineering, that kind of thing. And, when we went and visited, we had an appointment with the director of their Christ College, which was kind of an honors college thing they did. Sat down and talked with my son for an hour about all sorts of things involved in their program, just at that element of the program. And then we were just taking a tour, walking through the engineering building, and one of the professors happened to be in his office and just stopped in, and he sat and talked with us for half an hour. And specifically talked about the fact that as a professor, he left industry because he wanted to come to a place like this where he didn't have to do research. Valpo is really a teaching university. He just wanted to connect with kids. He wanted to teach kids engineering. He had such a passion for it. He just wanted to share it with everybody. He was sold. My son wanted to go to a place that had that kind of culture, had that kind of connection with kids, that kind of intimacy. And it's really interesting because they did all sorts of really unique activities. They would have a contest, the electrical engineers against the civil engineers, against the mechanical engineers, against the whatever else they had. And they'd see who could put together the best video having something to do with engineering and that kind of thing. I don't know. And the professors would be a part of that game and that process with the kids making these goofy videos. And I saw some of the stuff that they did, and I just watched it. And I think, now you can see why, kids are drawn to some places like that, because there's tremendous relationships that can develop over that opportunity you have to spend that amount of time in that place like that. And obviously learn far more than just engineering. So those are some important things for you to think about as you're looking at different visits to schools. Any other questions about visiting schools and what to look for and where to get information and such? Okay. So yeah, how do we pay for it? Okay. Basically, this graphic is talking about the fact that the prices for our public four-year schools have gone up a lot more than other schools, and we see that in Illinois more than any place else. Illinois is not a friendly place to collegiate students, and that's why we've got a lot of kids that go to Wisconsin, we got kids that go to Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. It's just issues in Springfield and so on. The other thing that I want you to see, and this is where we get back to that issue of okay, so what can we afford? Notice a distinction here between published tuition and fees and net tuition and fees and room and board. And then here's just tuition and net tuition, okay? So, one of the things I mentioned to people is it's definitely a market that is attractive and beneficial to you as students right now, because colleges, particularly four-year universities, are desperate for students. They're desperate, obviously, for good students. The demographic of college-going students continues to shrink. And so, there's a number of universities that have gone under in the last 5 years as the financial expenses of running a university continue to grow and the demographic of student population continues to shrink. And so, one of the ways in which schools try to address that is in scholarships. And so that's why you have this tremendous discrepancy between the published tuition room board and the actual. It's not too different from buying a used car. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with saying to school B, I'm really interested in school B, but school A is giving me this much. What can you do? And it's legit. You absolutely can do that. Now, in some cases, they're not going to do anything, because in some cases they might not need to or want to. Okay, I was talking with some students this week that just have a heart set on going to the University of Alabama. Okay, well, football is one thing and college education is another, but apparently in many cases that's not true, because everybody wants to go to Alabama. So they don't have to encourage students to attend there, because everybody in the world wants to go to Alabama. Not totally sure why, but there are a lot of other great institutions that are very interested in getting our kids especially And yes, some of it has to do with test scores, some of it has to do with GPA, a lot of it has to do with the study habits that they know our students have because of the expectations that we have. A lot of it has to do with the level of activities that our kids have been involved with because of the opportunities that we offer and the kind of resume that they end up from here. So there are a lot of schools that are definitely interested in our students. And so, yeah, there's a big gap here between the sticker price and the real net price. And, use that to your advantage. You absolutely can. We'll talk a little bit about some financial aid stuff now. FAFSA is something that's a key to the whole financial aid process. It's the federal application, the free application for federal student aid. And we'll talk about this again when we have another whole program on financial aid in the fall, but just so you kind of get a picture in your mind of how this works. Basically, virtually any university is going to say, if you want to come to our school and you want financial aid, you need to fill out your FAFSA. FAFSA basically spells out family income, assets, that sort of thing, and how much of that's available for paying for college, and that determines a student need. And once they determine a student need, then as a university, they can decide how much of that need are they in a position to help meet when it comes to the difference between what your family can afford to pay and what their tuition costs. The process for going through that is basically an online process that involves essentially using some tax forms and crossing that over to the FAFSA program, and that ends up getting factored into a student aid report and expected family contribution, and then that's what the colleges use to determine what kind of aid you're eligible for. Now, that's specifically need-based aid, okay, which would be different from some other aid as we see that. But that process begins on October 1. You can go online and find some information about it at some of these sites now if you're interested in. Again, we'll have a meeting in September to get you ready for that, and can pretty much take care of all those sorts of details then. So that's the need-based side, which is available to help students who don't have finances to attend a school. And one thing to keep in mind is once you determine your family's estimated contribution, that contribution is going to be the same no matter what school you go to. So theoretically, if you can only contribute this much, but one university costs this much, another university costs this much, you could still end up paying the same amount no matter which university you go to. It's a different amount of aid that you'd be eligible for. Now, in some cases, some of that need might be met by loans, but in other cases, particularly if you have strong grades and you're a student that school is really interested in, they're going to do what they need to do to get you there. So that's the need-based side. The merit-based side is going to be based upon things like academic, artistic, athletic, other abilities, as well as other activities, community service, and those sorts of things that are, again, all are a part of what that university wants to see in their students. And so if they see that in you and they want students like that at their university, then they're going to open up their pocketbooks and work to get you there. Okay. Scholarships would be things like grants, federal grants, state grants that come into play that you don't have to pay back. We'll be talking about MAP grants in Illinois. That's a good program. All of this process, though, is also time sensitive, just like everything else. As I've already indicated, your students, when they come back to school in August, their college search process is essentially over. At that point in September, they should be putting together applications, getting recommendations from teachers, getting their parchment accounts set up so that they can get transcripts sent, those sorts of things, and starting to fill out college applications. Many schools have deadlines in October, many have deadlines in November. And so by the time you come back to school, the search process is over, then you start the application process, okay? When you do that, the way the system is set up is you do FAFSA starting October 1 so that your FAFSA can go to the university at the same time your application does. So when the university sends back an application response, yes, we accept you, they can also send back something that says, and this is how much aid we're willing to offer. I realize that's not the end of the story. There's usually more to that, that again can be kind of worked on as you continue going back and forth with schools you're really interested in, that sort of thing. But the idea is that you're able to get that information pretty early on. And timeliness is key. That MAP scholarship that we talked about in the state of Illinois, opens on October 1st, many times they're out of money by Thanksgiving. So, and that's the case with a lot of other universities too, okay? I talked to kids about Marquette just because I'm familiar with them, and I've made a lot of tours there and all that sort of thing. They'll have 2,000 seats available for freshmen, and they'll, by December 1st, they'll have 16,000 applications. So, you know, if you're thinking, you know, a lot of schools are still accepting students on into January, February, that's true. A lot of them are. A lot of them aren't. So timeliness is key, and that's why I tell kids you need to be ready when you come back in August so that you can get stuff going, so that you're at the front of the line, not only for the seats that are available, but also for the scholarship funds that are available. Question?
So we have to have the FAFSA filled out first before they start offering scholarships and debating whether they want it or not?
Typically, yes. And the reason they require the FAFSA is that the college wants the government to give you as much money as possible before they have to give you any. And so they're going to say, we want your FAFSA so that we can see how much the government money will be, and then we'll know how much we have to pile on top of that. So, yeah.
So just visiting the colleges now in the summer is for her to decide where she might narrow it down.
The pricing aspect of it's going to be a little bit dicier now until you get that. However, there are some tools that you can find, and if you go to some of those sites when we're talking about FAFSA and filling out forms and that sort of thing, where they have estimators. And all of your universities also will have estimators on their university websites. So one of the things I'd encourage you to look at is go into FAFSA. So what FAFSA will do, let's see, you guys, you're going to be going to college in 22. So it's the 2020 tax return that they're going to use, that you're going to use for FAFSA. So what you can do is go ahead and file your 2020 tax return now. And when you get that back, you can go start plugging that into some FAFSA estimators, and it'll tell you pretty close what your actual FAFSA eligibility is going to be. So when you go and visit those schools now, you can say to them, this is our EFC, our estimated family contribution.
And then we have college scholarships and scholarships from the school.
Right. And as you see here, a pretty big percentage of money, the free money, the scholarships, comes from the school. Yeah, and that's, you know, their endowments, their foundations, those sorts of things. The bottom line is that's where they get to decide where they spend the money based on who they want to have come to their school. That's the bottom line for that distinction. Okay. Any other questions on scholarship and the money part so far? Okay, this again gets into a little bit of a breakdown for where the money comes from, and you see a big chunk of it comes from, I use Augustana because they have some really nice graphics, but a big chunk of it is their own college grant and scholarship. You know, there's a work study, student loans, state grants, federal grants, and other private scholarship and grants. Okay, you know, we hear a lot about these sorts of foundations that have significant grants, and there are those foundations out there that give $10,000, $15,000 a year grants to kids. The problem is everybody in the nation's applying for those scholarships from those big foundations. And you know, they've got their time frames and their priorities, and so those end up being challenges to receive. Your best chance for your scholarship money is going to be from the institution itself. Okay. So one of the key parts of the process for you in terms of applying is going to be transcripts, and I just threw this up here so you have an idea of how that works, because just trying to eliminate confusion on that. Parchment is a system that's used now to electronically transfer transcripts. Colleges don't want to mess with paper, and so virtually everything's electronic. Parchment is a secure transfer process for that colleges accept. And the best part about it is the state of Illinois pays for it for you. So from now until the time of August after your senior year, August 1, Parchment's free. You can send your transcripts any school in the country, any number of schools. It's all free. The state of Illinois pays for it for you. Okay, so in the fall, when we come back to school, I'll take the seniors well, I don't take them in the lab anymore. You all got your own lab with you. So we'll go on your Chromebooks and we'll set up a Parchment account for you. And so you'll be set to request your transcripts and send them any place you want to on your own, no cost. Okay. Here's some other resources. Again, this stuff is available. It's going to be on this this PowerPoint when it gets posted on Counselor's Corner. It's also available on the pages on Counselor's Corner that lay out the college search process and that sort of thing. Anyway, some of them have to do with searching for the careers, searching for colleges. This is a good site to go to if you're looking at not sure what we want to major in. They've got some really cool videos of different majors and careers and that sort of thing that's available. This is scholarship money. What do I want to major in? Some more information about going to college. This is a local organization that does scholarships. We'll talk about that next year. And I always mention, make sure as a student that the students are registering for ACT, because there's a lot of questions on there that are specific for students, to students. Sometimes parents go on there and try to fill it out and it ends up not being very helpful. I also have kids that show up on test day and don't have a ticket because they didn't fill out the registration. They didn't know they needed a ticket and mom forgot to give it to them or whatever. So just students, do that yourself and you should do that anyway. It's your responsibility. Okay, some information about how for us to stay connected. From here, again, I've been talking a lot about Counselor's Corner and the information that's available there. We've also got a Guidance Office Facebook page where we post a lot of information concerning college scholarships, internships, summer programs. One of the things I would encourage you, if you're interested particularly in a highly selective university, take a look and see whether or not they have a summer program that you can get involved with this summer. A weekend or week-long program for kids that are pre-med, that are engineering, that are, whatever. There's a lot of cool, fun programs out there, especially STEM-related and that sort of thing that universities offer. Why do they do that? Well, first of all, they want to get people to come to their campus because that's potential future students. And it's an opportunity for you to learn about that university and spend some time there, see their resources, meet their professors, that sort of thing, get involved and see what that college is like firsthand. It's also a way for that university to learn about you. And so we've had a lot of kids that have gotten into some pretty highly selected universities, and some of it's been facilitated by the fact they went there for some summer programs the summer or 2 summers before they were seniors. So look for those opportunities. We post a lot of stuff on the Facebook page there as well. I've got a remind.com account for those of you as juniors or members of the class of 22. And then here's the information about how to log into that Illinois Career Information System that I talked about before too. I'm going to stop the share here just so I can check and see if there's anything on our chat that we want to talk about. What is a website that helps narrow down your college search? You mentioned earlier. Yeah, so that's the ILCIS that we just saw on the last page that was just up here on the PowerPoint. And the slides will be available on the Counselor's Corner as well, so you can take a look at those online. If you want if you want a PDF of that, yeah, you can just email me, and I can send you a PDF of the slides as well. But you'll be able to see them on the Counselor's Corner website as well. Okay. Any other questions? Lots of stuff. You know, the important thing, coming back to where we started, everybody's got a different search process because everybody's different. Everybody's got different gifts, different passions, different directions they're going because God made us all different. And that's the thing that I really enjoy because I think it's fun talking to different kids all the time, and I can just see their personalities come out in the discussion they have about the career they're thinking about and the college they're thinking about and that sort of thing. I think that's just awesome to see them grow and kind of become themselves in that process. So parents, I want to encourage you to help your kids through that aspect of the process, because one of the things that you can do that's really helpful to them is just listen to them and recognizing that you probably know them better than they know themselves. give them some feedback in terms of, yeah, I see that really suiting you quite well because blah, blah, blah. Or, are you sure that's something that's going to fit for you because blah, blah, blah. You know, it's interesting. I'll have kids come into my office and say, you know, I'm really interested in being either an engineer or an entertainer. I'm thinking, wow, okay, it's like if I were to lay out a spectrum, that would be at one end and that would be at the other end, and how is the same person thinking about this? Well, you know, back when we were at the freshman program, we talked about prefrontal cortex, and that part of your brain that makes logical decisions doesn't develop until you're 25. Okay, so yeah, sometimes when kids are talking to me about things like that, I can just tell, okay, they haven't quite got a grasp of this yet. So I just ask them questions. Okay, so are you really looking for the kind of job where it's going to be primarily you sitting down with a computer and manipulating parts and using that to design and build something for somebody else that you're never going to meet? Or are you the kind of person that really wants to be in a situation where you're interacting one-on-one with people about something, or with people in a group, or you've got some kind of opportunity for you to really develop a relationship with somebody and care for them and nurture them and help them that way? You know, because those are two different ends of the world. And sometimes, I mean, obviously my knowledge of these kids is much more limited than yours because I've got 500 of them to keep track of every day. But sometimes I can look at them and say, you know, this is not you, not the you that I know. And all it takes is a couple of questions to get them to realize that. Oh yeah, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Okay, maybe I do want this one instead. And, you know, so sometimes that's the kind of help they need from you as parents, is just kind of getting a better understanding of themselves and who they are and what their interests are and their passions and their gifts and that sort of thing. And that's a huge role you can play. You know, you don't get to make this decision for them for the most part. I suppose if you're totally paying the bill, you get to make the decision for them. But, you know, this is an important decision for them to play an important role in, but they need your help and your assistance and some wisdom and insight from you as parents for that. And I'm certainly willing to help with that too, to the extent that I can, and that's why I love doing what I do. But you've got a special role there to play as parents. And so spending some time with them, encouraging them to spend some time doing all the stuff we've been talking about here, doing the research, getting the info on the schools, doing some comparisons, and then let's sit down and talk about stuff. Okay, let's you know, for me and my kids, it was always going down to Dairy Queen down the street here, and that's where we talked about all sorts of things. But they need you for that, and it's a great opportunity for you to spend some time in touching their lives in that way. So thanks for coming tonight. And thanks for being a part of Rockford Lutheran, and blessings on your search. Enjoy.